Between 2021 and 2023, Breakthrough conducted a research project that explored gender sensitivity in content consumption and production patterns among young people in Delhi, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. In-depth interviews with film industry professionals and focus group discussions with young people revealed that pop culture and cinema content creators weren't engaging enough with gender issues. To discuss cinema and gender in the context of our research work and in light of recent developments in the production spaces of film industries, we are excited to announce our next panel, Shifting the Cinematic Gaze, Why Gender Matters in Storytelling. And our esteemed guests for this panel are Vijay Krishna Acharya, who's a renowned Indian filmmaker and screenwriter. His filmography includes Dhrum Trilogy, Tashan, and The Great Indian Family. Nitya Mehra, who is an Indian film director and screenwriter. Her stellar work includes shows like Big Girls Don't Cry and Made in Heaven. She has also worked as an assistant director for critically acclaimed films like Laksh, The Namesake, and Life of Pi, among others. Shweta Venkat, popular editor in the Hindi film industry with work spanning films like Newton, Gangs of Wasseypur, and Haseen Dilruba, to name a few. We request you all to come onto the stage for the panel, please. Vijay, Nitya, and Shweta will be in conversation with Manjusha Madhu, Senior Manager Research at Breakthrough. The stage is all yours, Manjusha.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Despite the rains, we're just so glad that everybody's here. And thank you so much, Vijay, Nitya, and Shweta. Thank you for coming for this event. We're so glad that you've kindly given us your time. To sort of start off, and I think Joe sort of briefly alluded to it, we did a research as part of Breakthrough's bigger pop culture work, where we wanted to understand what consumption patterns are. यंग खासकर यंग लोग क्या देखते हैं, क्या क्या कंटेंट देखते हैं, कैसी सिनेमा देखते हैं, and at the same time we also wanted to understand what is happening in the larger industry, right? So both OTT and the Hindi film industry. We wanted to understand what is happening, what are the imaginations that are fueling storytelling, and to understand where gender sort of figures in all of this. So to sort of kickstart the conversation, I was wondering if each of you could perhaps share your impressions in terms of how do you see decisive shifts around gender in the kind of stories that are imagined and told today? So maybe we can start off with Nitya and then sort of go to Vijay and then Shweta.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. It's always a good conversation when we talk about such subjects, and I hope I can do justice. Do I see a difference? Yes and no. I think if I were just to break it down, storytelling pretty much connects us. So over centuries, I feel like whether it's knowledge being passed down or it's a worldview, that's what we get from storytelling. So be it literature, cinema, all of that. Now, I think a good story has the ability to maybe introduce a person like me from Juhu to a world or in that another person that's inhabiting that I may not have a clue how they live, how they eat, any of it. And at the same time, it may also make me, a good story may make me feel seen and heard. And I feel like, so that's how storytelling connects us. But the truth is that for millennia, I think that stories are being told by men. So, and it's hard because then all the values that we gain from these stories are pretty much from that male perspective. Now, that is definitely something that's happening. So I do feel the amount that needs to be done, we're not anywhere near that. But yes, I'm very fortunate that I've been part of a generation that, or just as a filmmaker, I've been privileged to tell the stories that I want. And I feel like with OTT, a lot of that has also changed. I recently did a show called Big Girls Don't Cry, and I know for a fact if I wanted to do that as a film, release it in theaters, no one's coming. No one's coming. And I remember actually a very, very prominent OTT platform, the first one I went to with them, their feedback was, we love it. Can we get some boys? And it's an all-girls show. So you know, whereas things have changed, have they really? I mean, we can debate this for years to come.
I also found this interesting that, you know, Lapaza Ladies is our official Oscars entry this year. And the first Indian entry to the Oscars was in 1957 and was Mother India, right? So it's an interesting sort of...
amazing.
Yeah, you know,
amazing.
so that sort of transition has happened. So Vijay, as somebody who's sort of firmly embedded within commercial mainstream cinema, what are your thoughts in terms of how, if at all, things have changed?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I think the kindness is yours. Honestly, some of these conversations, I'm very happy to be here but I think more as a listener. The big things, you know, we tend to expect seismic shifts. They don't happen. It's perhaps bite-sized things that will be the way forward. And I think that we are already, I'm sharing this stage with two eminent professionals. I love Nitya's work. I love Big Girls Don't Cry. There was a space perhaps, and it got filled. You see it. At the end of the day, the stories come from either the traditions that we follow, and often what is the environment which kind of allows it to happen. So there's a simple thing. There's a means of production. Now I can sit here and, I'm from University of Delhi. We come from fairly radical, non-mainstream backgrounds. All of us. We are all firmly embedded in what can be called mainstream entertainment or mainstream cinema. But there's a constant struggle with it because we're not born of it. We question things, and at the same time, the same as what Varun and Sucharita were struggling to say that entertainment, how is it entertaining, even something that they were doing, which is actually interviews. So that's actually the first step, if it is entertaining or not. And now whether it's Frank Capra or whether it's Mehboob Khan, everybody has finally told us, tell the story, make it entertaining, and everything else which is nuanced will follow. Don't preach. That's the first way to first step to lose. So I think today, I don't know whether Big Girls Don't Cry would have been possible some years ago. Having said that, I'm a firm believer of where television was and what was really good television in India, and we've seen a good time with it. And there were very, very good stories being told. And there were stories which kind of encompassed whether they were gender issues or in their own ways. But will things change? Obviously, it's never going to seem enough, especially in a country like ours where some things I will not understand because, see, gender is a privilege. For me, being a man it's a different kind of a privilege which will not. I have to learn how to look at things in a different way, and thankfully I have two daughters, and my wife ensure that I sort of learn that. So I think the conversations are interesting. We tend to either look at mainstream cinema or look at whatever is pop culture and look at it with a critical lens which comes from our own sort of outrage or an intellectual lens. Yeah. But the truth is, one has to sometimes look and see what is it that's working. Why is something which feels reprehensible to me cutting through? Is it because we are all implicated in it and there is something which, but that I feel is a defeatist sort of a perspective. The shit will always be there, and people will be patriarchal and all the rest of it. But I think name calling is not going to get you anywhere. And it's not going to win you friends. And for any conversation like this, I think storytelling and that edutainment that you were talking about, we always learn better with the story. And I think human beings are essentially decent. It's just a question of the reward that sometimes toxicity seems to give. And personally, I feel that in film and theatre, we go to see things which we don't want happening to us in real life. So a sort of a moralistic look at anything which is pop or film and theatre, I think it just doesn't work for me, because I think that's not part of the conversation. I mean, I'll probably just continue, but I think I should let Shweta talk.
Yeah, no, you're doing fine.
That's kind again.
Thank you for having me here. See, I believe that stories in general don't have a gender, right? It's the telling of it, that's where the shift happens. So just to give a short answer to your question, I've been working for a while now. Over the past about, say, 6 to 7 years, I would say there has been a shift for sure in the way characters have been written. Consciously, how I think producers and directors have been approaching, how to kind of show women characters and how to kind of build a narrative around them. Most importantly, I think women in the films nowadays, I mean, over the past few years, have some kind of a profession. We know some kind of a background, which was, which wasn't happening too much. So I think these small, the baby steps have been taken, which is nice to see. Parallelly, I think women filmmakers, women technicians, all coming into play, into this mix, have kind of only aided this whole cause of kind of taking this whole thing forward. So I think it's a good shift that's happening. Filmmakers who were not aware, I would not say aware, but who were not conscious, are now being extra and are being careful about how they write women into their narratives, which I think is a great thing. So yeah, I think we have to just take it from there and see how it goes.
And I was super excited when you came on board, because I think a lot of our conversations tend to remain with directors and people, story writers, and we don't think about technicians, right? Jo aapke cinematographers hote hain, they are the cinematic gaze, like the first gaze, right? Or your editors, who you are. So, these conversations need to happen in these spaces as well. But I also wanted to take a step back and reflect upon jo Vijay, shayad aapne, sort of touched upon it, and Nitya in your response as well. But why do you think this is happening? Is it a question of finances? Like, that's the elephant in the room, na? Jo paisa jo hota hai. And there's massive money riding in a lot of the way films and stories are told and the way they're imagined. And OTT somehow has been a decisive shift there. So why do you think these changes are happening in terms of a structure? Like, do you think there are like larger forces at play? Is it a question of better sensitization? More women coming into the fray, not just on screen, but occupying different spaces of storytelling and filmmaking and all of that?
Yeah, definitely. I remember in 2000, when I came to Bombay for the first time, and I went onto set, it was like literally, you felt that you are the woman on set, because there were 200 men. It was intimidating. Women were doing hair, makeup, wardrobe. And 20 years later, you have a set that you can walk onto, and it is filled with women, and nothing makes me happier. That's one side of it. The second side of it is, so definitely, because like I said in the first answer that I gave, yes, there is that. Every individual has a perspective. So the more women that come into play, that perspective is going to come in, for sure. But at the end of the day, yes, baby steps are taken, but I just don't know if it's enough. Like, I think we need just a lot more. And, you know, you spoke about Lapata Ladies, and it's such a great film. And I'm so excited for what's happening. But at the end of the day, it was released in theaters. And theatrically, it's not really made money. So it's really on us. Why are we not going to the theaters to watch it? Like, the audience really needs to step up. So we keep having these conversations. And I think what you're saying is that we have made an effort and we have gotten there, but we need a lot more support. Because at the end of the day, like he said, it is a business. And so you need to theatrically also make money. And I think the audience is definitely at play as well. Because it's very easy. Films that are about men are basically gender neutral. So, you know, it's like, oh, it's for everybody. Films about women, basically chick flicks, right? So they're chick flicks, so they're not really for, I mean, male films have become the norm. So already there's that going on. So I feel like what you were saying, sorry, I've gone off track because I have so much to say about the subject. But at the end of the day, we are making those changes. It's great. And it has to be, even when you have category, thank God there's not best female director. Thank God. Let's not do that. So let us all stay in the same, let it be an even playing field. I also don't think that we can be like, listen, 60% of the crew needs to be women. I don't think so. I think everybody has to come to play evenly, right? Like, let's have a fair chance at it. And yeah, I think so. That's what I wanted to say, yeah. But you were saying, why is this, like, how has the shift happened? So yes, it is about there being a lot more female representation. It is the OTT platforms. They came in and suddenly you could tell stories that didn't really need to follow a similar meter. Because at the end of the day, we are very lucky that there is no box office connected to the OTT, right? Because it is a different market. And with that, the writing of characters has changed. It has definitely. If you see Made in Heaven, of course, we've spoken about so many things. We're not only talking about women, we're speaking about so many different socio-economic groups, issues, and portraying not only strong female characters, but I think it's portrayal of communities that have never been authentically represented on screen before. And I think that comes in very well with having I'd say the female gaze. Female gaze will also cast differently. You'll write differently. You'll edit differently. So I mean, it should just be both gazes.
Vijay, what do you think, like, from like a commercial perspective? Do you think, because that is the big thing, no? And I think Priyanka alluded to it when we said, like, हम लोग आपस में तो बात करते रहते, it's largely an echo chamber. But how do you engage with mainstream cinema in any fashion whatsoever, right? And is that even possible?
See, the answer to that, honestly, is what. That's the conflict, and that's there's no real answer. And when you ask that first question of what is it that people want to see, I mean, at least as far as the Hindi film industry is concerned, I can safely say that's the one question everybody's asking. Because pretty much the writing's on the wall, things don't work most of the time. There are educated guesses, okay? Now, the same audience which comes in for the OTT shows, the most city, the kind of people that are around here, the ones who are talking there in the corner, these are the people who have actually consumed OTT platforms, but they don't go to the theaters anymore. The people who are going to the theaters are the ones that you think are somehow, they're not as, I mean, they don't, English is not their first language. They don't, the ones who are going and making all these films run. So there is a different, the texture of mainstream cinema as we are seeing it is changing. And what is coming through strongly, and the industry in whichever way it thinks, which always, you know, like lemmings, everybody just tries to think, okay, this is work, so one must do more of that, which is this very, you know, triumphalist, very everything on the wall kind of a large format thing, and perhaps there is some truth in it. To make the trip to the theater and to cough up the 500 rupees for the ticket and then 500 rupees for the popcorn, you want an experience which is worth it. You may not want to see something which you know is going to come on your OTT or television. So actually it's the city audience which was coming in pretty, I mean, if you look at it, 2017-18, the films that worked were all off mainstream. I mean, Ayushmann was the big star that year. And there was Bala, there was Dream Girl, there was Andhadhun, there was, you know, this was the dream time. And then comes the lockdown, then comes OTT, everybody samples it. When you come out of it, people are not going to the theaters that much. And it's not as if, I think they go with great word of mouth. 12th Fail is a shining example. Not 1 rupee spent on marketing. The film has done 55 crores. It's probably Vinod's most profitable film. And so there's the audience is there. It will come when you have done something which it feels it's compelled to watch. None of us here have the means of production. Okay, so I think this sense of, we all choose the stories, of course. We are attracted to a certain kind, and then you do the film which is possible for you. I came to Bombay, I worked with Kundan Shah on Kabhi Kabhi Na because Jani Bhi Duaram was like the big trip for us. So I thought I'd be making Woody Allen style films, but I mean, if somebody gives me the money, I'll make Annie Hall tomorrow. But the truth is, there's no, and we learn by accident, we learn after scraping our knees. It's a privilege. Would I change this for any other? Probably not. I love what I do. I think there's great energy. We were just talking about it. There is an energy on a set with people, with you're doing something, and of course, it's our right to fail. We are not supposed to deliver at the altar of commerce all the time. Because when it does well, it's not as if there is a funnel that's coming straight to my pocket. It doesn't work like that. So the audience, there is a certain demographic which the OTTs have. They know it well. They are all tech companies. They know who's coming in for 5 minutes. They know who's coming in for 15. My guess is, in theaters, in films, predominantly it's the young Indian male that is coming for more than one watch. And so therefore, if you look at it, the films will show you a certain trend. And then of course families follow. The territories that are giving good business are the ones that were not in play for at least the Hindi film industry, which is, it's called, they're still the British territories, CPCI, Rajasthan, Nizam. So, I mean, that's a distribution territory, and the beauty of it is none of it has changed. So I think there's, but having said that, this is also, it's a great time for people to reassess and tell your story. I don't think there's anybody, especially when there's no market for a tried and tested formula. There is nothing like a formula. When we are on the outside, when I was in Kirodimal College, in D school, I would also say, "Yare, kuch formula hota." The formula is pretty much entertainment. Can you write a compelling character? And in film, you cannot take away from the power or the presence of an actor that people like watching. And a star and an actor with talent are two different ball games. So, you know, that is that's something else, maybe a conversation on another day. But I think we are at the cusp of some big change. Now, either at the moment it is a creative crisis. If you were to ask me, we are pretty much in a creative crisis. What to make, who to make it for, who's coming to see, we don't know that. And I don't think they know it even in the OTT, because if it's not a producer who's independent, it's a studio. If it's not a studio, it's the OTT. Everybody has their own limitations, and everybody is there to sign some sort of a bottom line. So I think the fact that there is some sort of an egalitarian utopian world that will exist in any kind of a platform, it's rubbish. It's never been that, and it never will be. You have to work within the system, and you have to get your things done and have fun doing it. That's pretty much it. I mean, violence, okay, so we were like, the whole thing is about violence. I just wanted to say violence in film is it's a very nuanced conversation also to have. I'm sure most of the people here would have seen Kill Bill. It's just glorious violence, but it's film violence. When you see it on screen, the chances of you taking it back and, you know, ripping out a samurai sword and hacking someone to pieces is a far cry. So depiction and absorption and emulating it are very different things. And popular culture of films cannot be made they can't be answerable for this. Just the way that nobody talks about the violence of the Khap Panchayat. You know, you will talk about it, but it's a conversation to be had in different rooms. If I make a film which has that, it's never going to pass the censor board. So with film, there is a certain amount of money which is always at stake, and therefore it's always a soft target. So for all those conversations which I've had with my daily friends saying, "Arey, why doesn't Bollywood speak?" and why is because the victimization is going to be instant, and it's been there. But there is so that also is a different kind of a violence. Today, if you see reviews which are not from the erudite sort of critics and journalists, there is, by the time a film comes out, there are 500 people on YouTube with fairly violent and vile ways of reviewing it. And it's all abusive. It's violent. And it does, and it's depends on where you are at. It's sexist. It is, most of them are obviously men. But so there is I think there is a need perhaps for us to see film में एक तरह का violence होगा जिसको हम, when we see it, we consume it in the theater, we consume it in the dark with strangers. It's a different community that sees it. How we interpret it is really individual. So for that, the film cannot have the responsibility. Otherwise, we would all be, you know, every Sunday we should see Mother India and really sort of enjoy ourselves. Though I think, but look at it, it's tragic, but it's also, I think it's a great sort of a 1950s Nehruvian socialism type of a film, that you have two sons, you will have to choose one. You have to choose the good guy. And so anyway, Mehboob Khan is a different sort of theory of mine. I'll just go.
Yeah, and also like a different template of the way women have been conceived, like almost standing in lieu for the nation. And now we have slightly more grey and more problematic sort of character depiction and all that. But because Vijay touched upon violence, and Shweta, I think this is a great segue to ask you, because you've done some fantastic films. You've edited Gangs of Wasseypur, for example, right? And it's a disruptive, like it's a seminal film in terms of the way violence was shown, the way it's edited. So as as an editor, what are your thoughts when you think of the way you need to show violence? Do you have any misgivings? Do you have any apprehensions, or do you feel that creative licenses and freedom needs to prevail?
Editing is very violent. It's all cut, cut, cut.
Chop, chop, chop.
So, you know, with violence, it's what you see as like a graphic, violent scene is actually much easier to process, I feel, you know, because you see what you see is what you get. But it's the other kind of violence which you don't see, right? And there have been occasions where I've been asked to, like, you know, edit a rape scene, for example. And it's very difficult as a woman to, you know, just go through that scene and go through multiple takes and try and build around it and all. So there are devices which we try and use. Me and my director, we have tried a couple of times in films, across films. Is like you don't show the actual act or say any kind of domestic file coming. I just remembered, in fact, 5 minutes back, many years ago, I was editing a lot of ads for Breakthrough Bell Bajao, you know, and it had this man, I think a couple of kids are playing cricket in a colony, and then they hear some, you know, I don't know if you remember that ad. Something, yeah, Bell Bajao, and then he opens it. They can hear. So basically, they can hear sounds of, you know, domestic abuse. So it's basically you use these devices. You don't show the violence, but you hear them. So you use sound. You use other visuals to depict what's happening. For example, there was a film called Bhosle, where an act of rape is being, you know, committed. But then there's also, it's cut parallelly with, you know, these violent, seemingly violent images of Ganpati Visarjan. So, you know, the sound of that, the graphic visuals of, you know, painted faces, people going crazy in a Visarjan, as opposed to, like, you know, and with an act of rape being happening. So all that kind of builds up to a certain kind of impact, which is probably, I mean, I can't use the word tastefully, but maybe in a far more impactful manner, you show the same violence as opposed to seeing it in a very crude, crass way. So I think when people depict this kind of, you know, integrate this into the scenes, it becomes much more easier, and you start even respecting the voice of the filmmaker. He's not out to kind of, you know, shock the audiences. So that helps.
Do you have these sort of conversations, like to violence, to titillate, or, you know, how do you imagine that? Do you think to provoke, or are these conversations that you have with your director, for example?
Yes, yes, of course. At every step of the way, it's like, I mean, I have even had directors who say, "Thoda aur dikhao," you know, which is very unsettling. And why are you hiring me for this? Because I've cut Gangs of Wasseypur. So that's another thing. Oh, aapne Gangs of Wasseypur edit kiya. You could cut Gangs of Wasseypur. Honestly, nobody thought I was a woman in that room while editing the film. It happened. They made me aware that I was a woman who edited the film much after the film released, you know. So it was very strange. So they think that because I've seen that kind of violence, I can do anything, you know, which is, you know, sometimes it's very difficult to get this message across to directors. And with violence, it's not only physical violence, also the passive aggressive type, the emotional types. Those are very difficult to navigate, but the good thing is directors, some of them, are ready to have that conversation in the edit room. You win some battles, you lose some, but then you try and figure out a way to, you know, make it, it's like a balancing act, so that it doesn't seem ki, acha aapne ye kiya, you know, so yeah.
Also, Nitya, I wanted to ask you, because your work also deals with violence, but not, I mean, it's a different kind, right? It's natal violence, it's family, it's a personal space, and I don't think people talk about that enough. It's evident in Made in Heaven, it's evident in Big Girls Don't Cry. So is that conscious at your end? Because whenever एक मैस्कुलिनिटी का एक लैंग्वेज होता है ना वायलेंस को लेके हमेशा, बट हम कभी भी एंगेज नहीं करते फैमिली के अंदर जो होता है नेटल. फॉर एग्जांपल ब्रेक थ्रू वी वर्क अ लॉट अराउंड कम्युनिटी स्पेसेस, नॉर्म्स दैट नॉर्मलाइज वायलेंस एंड द काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स दैट प्रैक्टिसेस दैट हैपन, सोशल प्रैक्टिसेस जिसकी वजह से आपको लगता है कि और घर पे होता है बहुत सारा, सबसे ज़्यादा खुद के घर पे ही होता है. So you touch upon it in a beautiful way in a lot of your. So how does that happen for you? Is that a very organic process, something that you're conscious of?
First of all, it's amazing. It just dawned upon me. It's so incredible the work that Breakthrough does. So I'm just calling that out. Because we're making films, it's different. You guys are like on the ground doing the real work. Cinema storytelling is obviously, it mirrors the times we live in. I think a lot of it. You get inspired. I mean, I could be inspired. I have a 4-year-old. I take him to the beach, and the other day I'm thinking, oh, why don't I have a scene on the beach with a 4-year-old? What scene? No, I don't know. But like it's your environment. So the newspapers that we read, the news we watch, the people we talk to, it influences the way we tell our stories. So obviously, you pick a lot from that, and I think that there is violence. I mean, there is so much amount of, like, there's a big amount of domestic violence or abuse that takes place. So violence is not necessarily the Kill Bill kind of like, come, let everyone punch each other. But I think that kind of violence is something that it disturbs me personally, and I feel extremely helpless. And I think that's what happens to most people. When you feel helpless about something, you find a way to be able to deal with it. For me, that way is by being able to tell that story. And the worst thing is, you want to get it right, because you have not perhaps maybe experienced it. You just want to do right by that person. So you got to get your research down, because the minute you start portraying it like inauthentically, you lose the audience. You lose the person that you want to make that person feel seen, heard, right? Because you're representing them on screen. So it's a huge responsibility at the end of the day. I just want to say, because we're talking about gender and violence, our next show is something that my husband and I have co-created, and it has a rape case that takes place. It is incredible when we talk about being in an edit room and having the male-female perspective. Because the way I am looking at that scene, we both have to, like, his threshold for that is so much more than mine. It's incredible, the difference. So I do, like, the perspective, the female gaze, the gender perspective is absolutely important in storytelling, because all of this is kind of, interlinked. We just have, like, what she spoke about, threshold. It's different for men and women. It's definitely different. So yeah.
I think we keep referring to an audience, and audience jab hum zikr karte, it's always an amorphous entity. We don't know who the audience is, and it's a rough guess. But one thing that emerged from our study, and also I realized that a lot of research that's out there, a lot of market researchers who say this, आपके audience में सच्ची में औरतें नहीं हैं. And it's your young men who are largely your consumers. So if your demography is somewhere between 19 to 30, chances are कि आपका arithmetic नहीं figure करने वाला, ये नहीं हो पाएगा. So that is a thing, and I was wondering if, because each of you did mention, sort of allude to this sort of audience as an entity, but I was curious to understand, आपके पास कभी भी data आता है या कोई information आता है कि अच्छा, and I also asked this because, there are a lot of these small town films that have emerged, which has come with your sense of violence and, acha, rustic aisa hona chahiye, bhasha aisa hona chahiye, this is authentic. So that's clearly defined some of the kind of films and OTT series that have emerged. So is that something that you're cognizant of, the audience, that vague entity that's out there?
See, I mean, first up, purely if we were to talk about the choice of the story, I think your first audience is yourself. At least I can say that for me as a writer, and I think pretty much for most of us. But this amorphous audience that you talk about, yes, there is some data that's there, but nobody seems to have crunched it and or shared it with us. So our guess is as good as the next person's. But the audience is not a static thing. It's in fact, if anything, in a country like India, it's extremely dynamic, and it's also it's very much. You have to look at it. Sometimes I feel that you look at the way politics is going, because there is a sort of a flip saying which says that the politics and the films, you get what you deserve, and in that I think there is a little sense of how much violence you can take as an audience, if there is a certain amount of violence that you can take as a normal citizen of this country. And I think there is in the past few years, we've seen a little bit of a shift there. I think there is a certain kind of violence that we've felt either desensitized to, or we have been made aware of that it exists. And that will filter a little bit. It kind of normalizes some stuff. So now, whether the audience is coming in for a certain kind of a thing, I don't think the audience knows what it wants. That's not what the audience comes to the theatre with. They come to see something, whatever you've promised them, and if you deliver on the promise, they go back home happy for their value for money. If you don't, you could not have a worse enemy. So on that front, yeah, I don't think there is the better data is with the tech companies.
But they don't share it.
And they don't
They
share
just
it.
No,
don't
but
would.
can I just quickly interject? It's like I was working with a director, and and he's known to make family films and all that. And I kept one day I asked him, so why do you have women making halwas and doing the thing in the kitchen? Why? So he said, that's the world I've grown up in. I've seen women, and this is what my audience wants. He's right.
Yeah.
But within that framework, what change can I bring in? How can I make the woman who's making a halwa in the kitchen also take a business decision? So he's trying to do these small things, and at least his audience gets that, navigation, and maybe something
And a
they
little
take.
bonus.
Yeah, they take back home something. So I think these are little ways. The audience knows sometimes what it wants. They know you're right. They know what they want to see. But in that framework, if we can just kind of push what we want to say, I think it's a perfect thing.
I think if you're asking, like, do we know the audience? Honestly, we didn't know for Made in Heaven. We just didn't. We knew it was going to be niche, and it did extremely well internationally as well. So that was a bonus. But we thought it would be niche. It did much better than what we expected. For Big Girls Don't Cry, I was like, no male human is going to watch it. And it's not like I didn't want them to watch it. I was like, oh, they're not coming in. But so that was incredible for me when people messaged me that they were like, oh, we put it on for you, but then we really enjoyed it. And I'm like, so then please, audience, just click on what you call the chick flick. You'll get the female perspective. You want to deal with your daughters, you want to deal with your wives, you want to be good son.
Nitya, they're all clicking, they're all watching, they're not admitting it, I'm telling you. They're all watching chick flicks.
On that note, I think we are out of time. So thank you so much. All of you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So is there a Q&A possibility, or do we begin? No. Okay.
I think we just wrapped, right?
Yeah.
We spoke
Thank
too
you so
much.
much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.